Hi, I'm Josh from Crunch Media, and welcome to another episode of Talent Talks, the podcast where we hero professionals within the talent attraction and recruitment marketing space. And a big welcome to Milan, team manager, talent acquisition over at SimlaWeb. Milan, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
We got there in the end. For those that wouldn't
We
have seen
did.
it, we had a few technical issues setting this up. We probably spent too much time thinking we were sat in a wind tunnel, but we made it. So thank you for your
Yes, we did.
patience.
That's all right. Happy to be
Really,
here.
no, thank you for joining us. So, as we do with everyone on the podcast, we like to start off with, so how you got here. So, over to you, really. Tell us your story. How did you get to SimlaWeb? What was the journey to where you are today?
Sure. I'll try to be as brief as I can. I originally kind of got into talent acquisition because of my wife, who at the time worked in a agency focusing for hospitality. She introduced me to the owner, kind of got into there. From there on out, I spent about a year or something there, went into a very small startup kind of company that didn't turn out to work at the end. It was only like 6, 7 months I've been there. From there on out, I went into the first time I actually went into a sort of like a tech role into an agency focusing on North American market, predominantly US, and working with some of the big companies and nonprofits and hospitals around the US. And it was predominantly focusing on tech roles. From there on out, I went into a product company, which is called B2B Soft. And there I was focusing fully on tech hiring, specifically in Ukraine. That was their main offices that they had. Been there for quite a while, actually, like two plus years there. Grew to a team lead, technically, there. Learned some skills about leading people and mentoring them and kind of dealing with capacity and so on. And then from there on out, I went into a company called Innovate, which was a Microsoft reseller. It was also focused on tech recruitment, predominantly in Eastern Europe, where we were trying to scale up the whole Eastern Europe. We had offices in Kiev and also in Minsk in Belarus. However, at the time, there was a little bit of a talk about potential war between Ukraine and Russia. So the plans were kind of a little bit scaled down. And then I got headhunted into SimlaWeb to help grow their Kiev office, which we were doing fantastically well. We hired about 20 something people in the first couple of months, right from the gate. And then a few months into it, I had to move to Poland because of the war. And from there on out, while I was still in Poland, I kind of had to refocus from tech into sales, marketing, product, and so on, which was a pretty steep learning curve, to be fair. And about around like April, May, I was asked if I would potentially be open to moving to London to take on a role here as well, which I did. And at the time, I was covering 6, 7 different countries, maybe more. So primary was UK, France, Germany, Ukraine at the time still. There was part of it. And then Singapore, Tokyo in Japan, and Australia.
What a story, and what a journey! You can come across a fair few countries.
Yes, it
So
was.
you left Ukraine as well, 72 hours before kind of everything got pretty serious.
Yes, so the war started. So we went out on a Sunday, and I believe it was like Tuesday or Wednesday or the morning of Tuesday or Wednesday when everything started. It was pretty close. We genuinely got lucky that we went out before we did.
And how did you manage to get to Poland for that? Was that arranged through work, or you kind of just had that contact base where you said, "Look, we're
So it
going"?
was, phew, it was a mix of kind of both. The company where my wife works, they were offering people temporarily to relocate to Poland or to Romania until things kind of calmed down in Ukraine. What we didn't know at the time when we actually went out of Ukraine is that the war is going to start. It was just a potential. And once we came to Poland, once everything started, we knew that we're not going to go back anytime soon. And from there on out, it was either the conversation of like, do we stay in Poland or do we go somewhere else?
And you've sat across a number of different roles, kind of looking at going from tech through to sales and marketing. Did you find kind
Yes.
of attracting talent in those different spaces challenging? Were there kind of different nuances to each one? How did you find that shift going from tech into kind of more sales led?
I actually also quite recently, before we even started the discussion about the podcast, answered this very same question to somebody else. It's different. What I noticed is that on the tech side, you especially so most of my experience in tech side was working in Ukrainian market. So back then we had a ton of different candidates, and it didn't really need to sell the company that much because most of the candidates, especially if you're a new company, that was a big thing in Ukraine, like startups. Um, Everybody wanted to kind of join some startup and make it successful and grow it fairly quickly. So we didn't have to sell the company or the brand or the position to the candidates as much. Um, and then when I transitioned into marketing and sales, specifically working here on the UK market and even in Singapore, Tokyo was a whole different animal. But we, or me and myself specifically, had to learn how to sell the company and how to sell the role to the candidate instead of the other way around, where usually in Ukraine the candidates would have to sell themselves to me to um, um, as to why I think they should go to the next stage. And here it's like I'm selling them, like, this is why you need to work for us. This is what opportunities you have here. This is what you can make here. This is what you're going to learn here, and so on. So it was different. It was a big learning curve for me as well, because everybody has different motivations and so on. And I had to kind of pick and choose from there, like, who do I send forward?
And you said there's potentially a difference in the markets as well. That kind of different markets
Yes.
are different beasts. What can you elaborate on that? How does it change, kind of moving across those different territories, kind of the Asian territories into Europe?
Yeah. So between in Europe, like, Um, actually, let's start from Tokyo. For example, in Tokyo, the talent market is not really focused on people going out and applying for roles or even replying to people on LinkedIn. Like, you need to go through networks, you need to go through referrals, and most of the hiring that I know of people doing in Japan is usually through agencies, because that's how most of the candidates are getting through from company to company. While in the other markets, in Singapore, for example, it's a very international place. There's a lot of opportunities for visa sponsorships for people coming in and out, and it's fairly cheap. A visa in Singapore, when I worked in Singapore, on the Singaporean market, it was about 140 Singaporean dollars, which wasn't a lot to pay for. So we had a lot of diverse candidates from across the regions applying and looking to get into Singapore, and then also into SimlaWeb, because we were just new at the market there, establishing an office. Now, in Europe, and specifically between UK, France, and Germany, you have to go out there and look for candidates. You have to go out on LinkedIn and source for them. Specifically, if we're talking about specific language candidates, they're in high demand, so they will not get back to you most of the time. So you really have to kind of like push through and understand what you need to tell them, basically, to get them to speak with you, and then you need to sell them the company and the role itself.
And that's interesting. It kind of maybe kind of skips a couple of conversation topics where you do want to cover, but kind of if you look at it that way, you could have mentioned that the employer brand is kind of being left to the side, and it sounds like that's what
Yes.
you're describing there, is that the process that you're having to go through is you're not really communicating the give and the get at the top of that attraction journey. It's very much as part of the
Yes.
candidate's experience, is bringing people into the room with you, yourself having to try and communicate that. Is that the case?
Yes. It is, yes. And specifically with employer brand, if you look at it, what I see most of the companies, and not just my current company, they're focusing on trying to find the right candidate. So everybody's right now picky as to what they hire, because they know that it's going to take the time and money to onboard the person and get them to be successful in the role. What that entails in the end is that the employer brand takes a hit, because people or recruiters in general don't focus that much on promoting the company as an employer. Like, yes, every company is promoting themselves as a product or a service, something like that, but not as an employer, which then again takes a hit.
Yeah, and is that something that you would like to be part of the process? Do you think? Because I imagine kind of, is this just a symptom of the tech industry, where tech industry is at the moment? Potentially a lot of businesses are looking for next rounds of investment. There's different challenges that people are facing. It's taking them potentially a very operational led approach to recruitment, to talent attraction.
I wouldn't call it operational, to be fair. I would call it efficiency. Looking for all the efficient ways to bring in the talent without spending more than you need. So what that means is just specifically, let's say like you have a recruitment team and you're asking them to go out and source and not spend, I don't know, a couple of thousands of dollars on platforms like Glassdoor and so on, where most people do and still look at the reviews and so on. But all those tools are pretty expensive. And again, operational efficiency right now is important, but also just being efficient as a team and spending as little as possible while delivering the high level results we're looking to have.
And it's interesting you mentioned kind of products like Glassdoor and Indeed, because I think they're currently rolling out employer brand packages, aren't they, for additional cost where you can create that space for candidates to engage with you. But it sounds like you're taking a very efficient led approach to recruitment. So kind of
yes. I still think, for example, if you compare Glassdoor, Indeed, and LinkedIn, from getting to know the company, I honestly think that LinkedIn has much more chances of being successful there, because there's a live page that you can add on your LinkedIn, on your company LinkedIn profile, that you can share stories from employees and so on. So for me personally, like when I go and look at a company, I usually go on LinkedIn. Like very rarely would I go on Glassdoor and look at the reviews. That's generally, I maybe did that like once or twice.
and kind of, if you then look at it in the round for kind of for the candidate experience, especially kind of in the markets that you're in, you mentioned that kind of there are dogfights over salaries. There's kind of this continual competition.
Yes.
Do you think that's potentially a symptom of the employer brand as well? That because these tech businesses are having to sell themselves in the process, that it's not creating that concept of the culture, that concept of the businesses, that kind of tech hires are happy to jump around kind of for the next salary?
Yes and no. It's a little bit difficult question to answer, because it depends on which group of candidates you talk about. If you're talking about experienced hires who require a specific language or specific technology skills for you that you need to hire, they're usually in high demand, and they're getting tons of messages left and right. And of course, unless they have a specific goal to work for your company that you're looking to recruit, most likely they're going to go with a higher package or somewhere where they know it's going to look good on their resume. So, for example, instead of going to, I don't know, a company that's like 1,000 people, they might go to a Google where it's going to be on the resume, hey, I worked in Google for 3 or 4 years, and this is what I did there. So there's a lot of different things that have a impact on it. So it's a difficult question to answer, but yes, there is a little bit of employer brand into it as well. Because if you have a good employer brand, then the candidate will have a choice between like, oh, I can work for Google, or I can work for this amazing company that's just coming up in the market and potentially can make a lot of impact there as well.
I guess it must have an impact on the efficiency as well if you're having to sell the business and sell the brand and sell who you are as part of the process.
Yes.
There's an impact there. So maybe it kind of negates itself a little bit, the approach of not doing that at the attraction side.
A little bit, but it's not. It takes away from the interviewers, because yes, while the interview process is a two-way street where both you're selling yourself, you as a company are selling yourself to the candidates, but also the candidate is selling themselves to you. I always think that's a two-way street. But on the other hand, it takes away from that interview. Let's say that the hiring manager has a 1-hour interview with the candidate, and it takes him 5-10 minutes to kind of sell him on the role and the company. You lose a little bit of time as where you could have built a better relationship with the candidate by discussing their experience and your expectations between each other.
And you mentioned before that, I think you said that the talent attraction teams you're having, like you said, we're having to work more efficiently. You're potentially slightly leaner than where you'd want to be. Is this a post-COVID reaction, or is this just kind of the way that the tech industry is moving?
I wouldn't say that it's for across all the companies, but most of the companies are looking into that efficiency. So let's say you had a company that had we can look at Meta, for example. They had a huge recruitment team around the world, and the first people that got laid off in the first and the second round were most of the recruiters. And I noticed that specifically here in the UK, where the moment they announced their potential layoffs, like the next day, there was a ton of posts online, because everybody during COVID was scaling up and hiring as many people as they could, because that was the market, like everybody was doing that. Post-COVID, not so much. The companies are focusing on profits and efficiency, so they need to maybe scale down a little bit the hiring, which again, in turn leads to smaller recruitment teams. But again, in the future, they might face issues when they're looking to scale up again.
I think really, really topical that you say that, and this is probably going to give the day away that we're actually recording this. But I don't know if you've seen in the news today exactly that WeTransfer have just been taken over, and I think they're looking at 75%
No.
layoffs. Yeah,
Wow. No, I haven't seen that.
so 75% layoffs within
Wow.
what's always been considered quite a prominent B Corp tech business. So it
Right.
just goes to show, and I think everyone would have noticed kind of like the little green badges going live on LinkedIn, and kind of there's seeing more and more and
Yes.
more of that kind of within, especially within recruitment and talent attraction. It feels like everyone is
Yes.
starting having to work that little bit leaner, and kind of those efficiencies, those reorgs, those restructures are such a common conversation, especially I think, especially it feels like the last 6 months. You're looking at kind of some of the events that you've got in industry in places like RecFest, where they're encouraging people to go around,
Yes.
where the lanyards with the special with the different colours, so it's like a red, amber, green to kind of show your interest. It feels like there's a lot more of that going about at the moment.
Right. It is for sure, and there's there's not much news right now about layoffs, but they're constantly happening. Like it's not like it stopped, like I don't know, 2022 or 2023. It's still going on. It's just not as widely reported as usual. There is I forgot the exact name of the website, but you can Google it, like layoff tracker, and it's pretty accurate as to what's happening in the market. Kind of shows like how many people per year have been laid off and so on. You can filter by specific company or specific region and so on. It's generally a very useful tool for people looking to hire amazing talent. You can go ahead and see who is laying off recently.
It's a good recommendation, and kind of
Yeah.
if you look at the challenge then that you described, that you're having to work more efficiently, that you're having to communicate the brand proposition within the interview process. What are SimlaWeb doing? How are you overcoming that? What's the solution for you guys?
Yeah, so SimlaWeb at the moment, we're focusing on quality over quantity. So we're looking into very specific industries. We're looking into not necessarily like specifically like making the interview process shorter, but making sure that we cover the right skills on each step of the interview process. So, for example, we would have like TA person speak with them at the start, looking at what they're looking to do, telling them a little bit more about the role, and then also getting their expectations as to both salary, but pretty much their motivations as well for moving. Then you go into the hiring manager, which is going to focus a little bit more broader about the role, getting deeper into their experience. Then we would have, depends on what type of role we're talking about, either a case study, which could be where a candidate, if you're talking about sales roles, present a specific deal that they're proud of that they did, or we could be looking into on the tech side where they're going to do a technical interview, which they're going to go through a live coding session or something like that. And then after that, we have a HR interview where we sit with the candidate for like an hour and just dive deep into mainly some of the things that we already know, making sure that they're going to work well with the team, making sure that they're going to be happy here and successful once they join the company.
So it's a very skills-based process, skills-based operation.
Very. But it's also behavioral as well, because we're looking into behavioral questions a little bit more, and then looking how the candidates react to certain questions, and basically seeing their reaction.
But the quality and the skills base is taking dominance within that whole process. That's how you're kind of
Yes.
creating that efficiency.
Yes, because we saw a lot of success of when we're talking specifically about quality. What I meant by that is, yes, we're looking at specific types of profiles. Yes, we're looking at specific industry. But then once we find a candidate that we think might be a good fit, then we focus on skills and their experience and like really digging deep into will they be successful here.
And is that a very manual sourcing process as well to find those candidates? Because you mentioned
It is, yes.
There's tier one languages that you're keen to find as well, for the multilingual
Yes.
from perspective.
It's focusing on tier one countries, which usually for most companies, it's like France, it's like DACH market, which is German speaking area. So tier one countries would, in my opinion, again, every company defines their own tier one countries differently. France would be one, and then looking for somebody with the French language skills in the UK right now. Across all the companies, not just ours, everybody's experiencing right now difficulty in, first of all, getting to the candidates because they're in such a high demand, but then on top of that, being competitive with other companies.
Mm. And are you finding that the kind of the process that you put in place is working? Is it making a difference, for that the efficiency levels that I'm assuming being targeted with kind of internally?
It's helping in a sense that we see a lot more people being successful in the once they join the company. Whether that's helping overall the candidate process and making sure that the candidate is going quickly through the process, that's a different question. But on the other end, like we do see people being staying with the company longer and being successful in that role.
Which is important. You see a lot of chat at the moment about kind of retention, and I think IKEA published that big case study in Forbes recently about the cost of retention, and it was something like $5,000 per person leaving the business. That's the cost, which when you mount it up, it turns into hundreds of thousands, if not millions, for them, because they're
it depends on how big the company is. It could be millions or billions.
And so retention is I think that's a really interesting point. Retention is so crucial as part of this process. It's very well finding the right talent, but finding the right talent that's going to stay is probably it's the same as the B2C process of customer lifecycle value, isn't it? Lifetime value. It's making sure that person will continually contribute and kind of bring something back and has the right DNA for what you want within the business.
But it's also looking at their motivations, like if they're having. If they want to grow with the company, it's always good, because that means that down the line in the future, we can find them something that they're going to be even more successful with, or they might grow into leadership roles, which is even better, because having somebody who starts in your company as an individual contributor and then grows into a leader, in my opinion, it's always better than getting somebody from outside, because they know the business, they know what the company needs, they know the people they're working with. So it's always easier for them to connect rather than having somebody from the outside.
And I think that we mentioned it when we first started talking, that feeds into what you enjoy about the role as well. You said that personal side, people by people, something. I think there's something, there's a running theme with whoever I speak to within the industry, and that's a genuine enjoyment of people and wanting to see people succeed and bringing people and developing people and giving people opportunities.
But it's also on top of that, yes, you see the people succeed that you hire, and you maybe gave them a chance when nobody else did, and they came to the company and they crushed it and they're performing and they're excellent. But also on top of that, once they succeed, you see that specific team succeeding, and then you see the company succeeding at the end. So it's rewarding in general. In the recruitment industry in general, depending on which industry you work, sometimes you don't see the impact that you have in the company. While how I look at the talent acquisition is you're the first line that the candidates are going to see when they're coming into the company. So you're the first person they're going to speak with. You're the one who's going to give them a first impression of the company, of the role, of the team, and so on. So it's very important to be very engaging, but also giving enough information to the candidates so they would be interested in joining you at the end.
Exactly. You're the front doors to the business, so the role really can't be kind of undervalued in what you're bringing. And like you said, I think that's a really interesting take on it, being able to see the overall business success. It's not just the personal success, but kind of the personal wins will then drive on kind of down the line, kind of over the years, for how the business then performs and those teams perform.
Yes, definitely agree with that.
And where do you see the talent attraction market moving to? Where's the industry moving the next 3 to 4 years from your perspective?
That's a good question. Kind of difficult, but also easy to answer. Like what I'm seeing right now is that there's a lot of candidates on the market, and they just keep. There's more and more candidates coming up every single day, whether that being through rounds of layoffs or new graduates coming out of university looking to get into the market. And what that is creating is you have smaller talent acquisition teams who generally don't have the time to go through every single resume and provide the personalized feedback to every single candidate. So you're going to get a lot of basic rejection emails, and that might get people frustrated, and it might impact your employer brand, and they might not want to apply again because you didn't reach out to them. But I generally see the market being oversaturated over the next few years when there's a disproportionate amount of candidates per roles open. Unless something changes in the market and then the company starts scaling up, it's going to be like this for a while. And you're going to have roles with companies in like 1,000 people range. You're going to have roles where usually you get, in the COVID era, you get, 20, 30 applications. Right now you're going to get 500, 600. So you kind of need to like go in there and have a look. and try to reply to everybody. And as we spoke a couple of weeks ago, the average recruiter takes between 6 to 15 seconds to look at the resume to make a decision whether to move candidates forward. And when you have that many applications, even more so, like we're trying to make a decision faster, which isn't a good practice, but that's what we have to do.
It's really interesting to say that, and it's such a, I think it's a really debated topic about kind of people getting back to you and kind of having that personalized feedback approach. I genuinely spoke to someone about an hour ago, and they were saying that they will stay up until 10 o'clock at night doing it, and they will make sure that someone gets, you know, at minimum 2-3 bullet points for, you know, whether it's from her or from someone else within the team. Whereas I know other people who have worked with high levels of volume in the public sector in the UK that have just gone, look, my job is to create an effective recruitment process, and if that means you're not getting personalized feedback, then so be it, because I can't give it. I'm dealing with such a high volume of applications; it's impossible. Do you think?
And it also depends. It also depends on the company's priorities. But what I personally try to do, I try to put myself in the candidate's shoes and looking like, how does it look like on the other end? And if I generally do have the time to provide the detailed feedback, I would. But I just being honest, like there's not always time to do that.
And do you think that's specific to certain roles, or do you think it's just going to be a symptom of the job market as a whole?
No, I think it's across all the roles, across the market. Maybe specifically tech. Again, I'm in tech. I can't speak a lot about other industries, but I do know also in some roles, candidates are getting the test task before they even speak with somebody, which for me is generally a little bit shocking, because they don't know anything about the company. They don't know yet anything about the role apart from the job description. You ask them to do the task so you can see, are they okay to go actually and speak with the recruiter, which they might get rejected anyway on the first stage. So that for me is a little bit shocking, but again, every company has its own process.
I think it'll be interesting to see how everything pans out in the next few years. It definitely feels like,
of course,
it's the tables have turned a little bit. It's less a candidate market now and very much an employer market. But that does mean there's such...
You took the words out of my mouth, yes.
There's probably such a high volume sitting out there. It's how you balance that and how you navigate that scenario.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And kind of, as we just close up, you know, you've had a wealth of experience. You've gone across multiple countries with, you know, kind of whatever's kind of gone over on Ukraine. You've had to deal with. You've gone across recruiting for multiple different roles in different businesses. With hindsight, would you do it again?
100%. I don't think I would change anything, but yeah, 100% I would do it again.
And kind of, if you could give yourself, kind of, you starting out in industry, go back to that point in time, your wife got you into it all those years ago. What would you tell yourself? What would be that little nugget that you kind of to give yourself inspiration, bit of hope?
Not to doubt myself, because actually maybe last year, I saw a TED talk by a co-founder of Atlassian, a big company out of Australia. He was talking about imposter syndrome, and the way he explained it, even after running a company for 25 years, it was his first job ever. He always said, like, don't doubt yourself. So that's definitely something I would tell my younger self in this case.
And I think the honesty is so crucial. It's something that imposter syndrome can hit all of us. I'm sure it's, you know, anyone listening will have had that at some point. You know, you step into those different roles with different challenges. It can be overwhelming. It can be frustrating, and you can kind of sit there and go, I can't do it. But the one thing I was always told is you wouldn't be sat in your shoes, and you wouldn't have been given the opportunity if someone didn't think you could.
Fair point. Yes, so, that's 100% fair point.
So that would be my takeaway. Well, Milan, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate kind of the honesty.
Likewise.
Kind of, you know, sharing a bit of the knowledge within the tech industry, sharing your past, your history within the recruitment industry too. So thank you very, very much for joining us. That concludes another episode of Talent Talks. Thank you to anyone who's listening, and hopefully see you very soon on another episode. Milan, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.